Well, we are getting closer to the finale of the Republican National Convention, where Donald Trump will have a starring role, of course. The former president is set to speak in just a couple of hours, and my next guest knows the power of a good speech. She was a former White House speechwriter for George H.W. Bush. Kate Cary is now a professor of politics at the University of Virginia. We reach her tonight in Charlottesville, Virginia. Thank you for being here. Appreciate this.
Thanks for having me, Travis.
So the reporting is that Donald Trump has written this speech himself. What message do you think he will need to get across to his supporters and also be able to widen his base and for this speech to be successful tonight?
Well, Travis, you're right. The word is that he has ripped up the earlier draft of this speech that was written apparently before the assassination attempt. And this new theme of unity that Mr. Bolton was just speaking about is what we're all expecting to hear tonight. And I think his goal, so any speechwriter, you worry about who the audience is, and there's always the primary audience, which is the people in the room. And in this case, it's the 2,500 delegates who are there. But those people are already sold on Donald Trump. He doesn't need to convince them. Really, his audience is the secondary audience, which usually in many circumstances, and this one for sure, is much bigger than the people in the room. And so these are the millions of Americans who I would call the exhausted majority. And those are the people he needs to convince to vote for him. And that is bigger than the MAGA base. That includes a lot of independent voters. It includes a lot of young voters who have never voted first time in their lives they're voting. And so that's his target audience tonight. And so that's, I think, going to affect very much what is in this speech. It's not necessarily about the people in the room.
Is it strange? Is it usual for a candidate at this level to write their own speech, or would it be a team?
Usually, George W. Bush had teams of speechwriters who wrote for him. But most politicians, it's one writer per speech, and you work directly with the principal. So I assume he hasn't written this completely by himself. I'm sure there's some people helping him, fact-checking, looking up great stories, quotes. Some of the people who've spoken at the convention already have had amazing speeches with great stories about how the policies that are in place right now are hurting them. And so I assume he's drawing on some of that. So I'd be very surprised if he hasn't had any help from anybody.
And so, to pick up on what you were saying there, what themes do you think he will need to highlight? And also, when it comes to that assassination attempt, how much of a focus do you think will be on that, or he should put on that moment?
So it's funny you ask. There was an earlier event today that there was some video that came out of that he spoke at, and I saw a brief clip of it, and he did seem very humble and not his usual self. Almost one of the first things that came out of his mouth was he thinks that the good Lord saved his life, and so I hadn't heard him say things like that in the past. I didn't realize if he's a spiritual kind of guy. I know your correspondent a few minutes ago, Chris, was talking about this spiritual feeling that she's hearing from these delegates that God intervened. So we may hear some of that. He has announced in advance that he's not going to name Biden personally tonight, which I think is a great idea for two reasons. One, I think there's a lot of Americans who are painfully aware of President Biden's shortcomings right now, and we don't really need to be reminded of that. And second, if he makes the whole speech about Biden, there could be a totally different candidate he's running against by next week. So I think it's smart to stick to the issues. So that'd be my main suggestion for him. He is outpolling the Democrats right now on all the top issues that are important to voters, whether that's inflation, the economy, immigration, crime. People are hungry for a positive vision of the future from both parties, and they're certainly not getting it from the Democrats right now. If he can put together a positive, forward-looking agenda that shows people how he's going to help them, more easily live their lives, I think that would be a tremendous speech. The other thing I would suggest is, I don't know if you've ever watched some of his campaign addresses, but he tends to go off teleprompter a lot.
Right.
And when he does, he can be very charming and very funny. And so I think he should stick to teleprompter so it doesn't go to a 3-hour speech tonight. But if he can have some humor and sort of turn on the charm, I think that would convince a lot of people who in the past have not supported him but might be open to it. I think he's got a real opportunity tonight if he chooses to take it.
So interesting to hear your perspective and your expertise on this. Mary Kate, appreciate the time. That is Mary Kate Cary, a speechwriter for former President George H.W. Bush.